Anthony Biles, and I'm here today with Eric from programwitheric.com and Neil Thawani. Is that how I say your name?
It's Thawani with a
Thawani.
T.
Awesome. And he's working for Infegy. And so what we're doing with this podcast is we're showing you like real world people who are doing awesome work in Ember. And we just get to know them a little bit better, get to know what their companies are doing. Because I know like we see the same celebrities all the time. And sometimes we think like those are the only people doing Ember. But that's not true. There are plenty of awesome people out there. All right, so go ahead and tell us a little about yourself.
Well, I am formerly a JavaScript developer. My last job, I told my boss or supervisor during one of our one-on-ones that I wanted to be a JavaScript wizard, and he readily obliged.
Spellbook?
I have a spellbook. It's called RTFM.
That's a very short spell.
So he put me on a test development team, and I did that for a while. And then I found out about this data visualization gig and Ember gig at Infegy, and interviewed here and really like the team, and the office that we work in is beautiful. And kind of made that move in April. And ever since April, I've been working on an Ember and D3 stack here at Infegy.
Oh, that's really exciting. So you've been programming with Ember just since April.
Yeah, just a few months now.
Wow, and you've already been able to do some really cool stuff with that.
The learning curve with Ember is just awesome. Within my first week, I was committing code. I was given a project to migrate an administrator panel, like the one that our sales guys use when they interact with clients. And it was built on Backbone on an old piece of software that we had. And our architect, Jessie, migrated that piece of software from Backbone into a new product, beautifully written in Ember.
Yeah, that's so what you're saying about the learning curve, that makes me really happy to hear, because I know that wasn't always the case. Yeah, this is a new thing.
Yeah.
Is it in production yet?
It is. It is all in production. It's called Infegy Atlas. It's been in production for about a year or so, maybe a year and a half. No, wait, that's not right. How long has it been in production?
Yeah, a year and a half.
About a year and a half. Good.
All right, so the whole company's been doing Ember for about a year and a half.
Yeah.
And so, like, where's the company located, and what do you guys do?
We're in Kansas City, Missouri. Here in the heartland of the United States. Infegy Atlas is a social media intelligence platform. So what we do is we take high amounts of data sets, very large data sets, analyze streaming text, and extract information from those data sets very quickly.
So you help companies sort of understand what their customers are thinking.
Yep, pretty much.
So like if Coke releases a new flavor and they can tell how people like it, so they can give people what they want. Is that sort of what you do?
That's a good summary of what we do. You can also look at, I guess, recently we publish blog posts every now and then. We analyzed McDonald's all-day breakfast and found that the expectations that were set before the breakfast was announced did not meet the results that consumers found based on an inconsistency in local chains. What the things that they served, something like biscuits or something. I don't really eat McDonald's a lot. I have a few times recently just because of the all-day breakfast. And indeed, Infegy Atlas did predict correctly that some of the offerings are not consistent.
Nice. So that helped McDonald's to be able to like discover what their customers were wanting from them.
And action steps to take, yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. I know that would have been really hard to do even just 20 years, well, even just 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. And so you're located in Kansas City with the team.
Yeah. We all work on site at the Infegy office here. It's about 15 minutes north of downtown Kansas City. We have a nice little kind of strip mall next to the office with a lot of grocery stores and places to eat and stuff. It's a nice place.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I knew I grew up in Kansas.
Did you really?
Yeah, so I'm a little biased.
That's funny.
The team's been using Ember for a year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
And you weren't there for that transition.
I was not, no.
Do you know why they decided on Ember and what the transition was like?
Well, our lead architect, Jessie, was trying out several frameworks at the time. She built a few small test apps because we wanted to do a little bit more robust data visualization, and do cooler things with the data that we were getting from our backend. So she tested out Backbone, Angular, Marionette, Knockout, and found that Ember's opinionated structure, its data binding, the view templates without the logic, backed by models and routes. She appreciated the community and the companies that had already adopted Ember, and the project seemed very well organized and very well run. The level of transparency, I think, was what really pushed us over the edge and made us take that leap.
Yeah, that transparency is like really valuable. And it's definitely not something we're used to, even from open source projects.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I know you got Jessie right there.
Yeah.
Jessie, do you want to add anything to that?
Not particularly. Basically, like he said, I knew we needed to build a new system. The old one was built kind of a more traditional sense, where the back end rendered the templates and then the front end was pretty dumb. It had a little bit of JavaScript for interactivity, but not much. And we wanted to change that to a purely API-driven, like very front-end heavy client, so we could do more interesting things with the data. So yeah, I built some small test apps and various other platforms and frameworks to kind of figure out what we liked. I did have some experience previously with SproutCore, so that also helped. The biggest downside to Ember, having spoken about the positives, was probably the learning curve early on. Because project was started maybe almost a year before we actually launched it, because it's a very, very large project. So that was a very, very early version of Ember. It was pre 1.0. Oh. And there's not much documentation. I spent a lot of time on the IRC chat, talking with the various people working on the project.
Oh, so you guys launched a year and a half ago, and you started 2.5 years ago.
Right.
Oh, yeah, that was that was a time.
Yeah, so it was rough. There were a lot of improvements made to Ember since then. So I had to do a lot of weird hacky code in the beginning to get some things working. But still felt that was preferable to the alternatives, the other frameworks that we had looked into.
Yeah, and so the process of upgrading, like pulling out those hacky things and replacing them with more Ember-y things, how was that for you guys?
It went pretty well at first. Problem is at one point we got behind on upgrades about Ember 1.5. And didn't really touch the upgrades until about Ember 1.12 or 1.13.
Oh, yeah.
It was pretty far behind. So we're kind of diving through that right now. It's taking some time.
Yeah, the 1.10 to 1.13 transitions were a little difficult.
Yeah, but most of it was able to be fixed through some scripts that did, find and replaces, some regex magic, and a lot of that sort of thing to get it working. And now we're kind of going through to clean it up and make it a little bit nicer. We also originally started by using Grunt to build the project, and Minispade is the module management. So we also had to transition to the CLI, which is a very different structure.
Yeah.
However, it's a lot cleaner and a lot nicer. But that was probably the bulk of the work, just converting the module system over and no longer using the global Ember and app dot namespaces.
Yeah, and you mentioned that you use regexes to do some of that work?
Yeah.
Oh, that's really interesting. I know there's some official support for that with like Ember Watson, and there was a converter from regular Ember to Ember CLI. What other sorts of things do you guys write?
It was a lot of Python scripts, and use Sublime. Sublime's regex find and replaces.
Oh, cool.
A lot of it ended up being very long regex strings, but it worked pretty well. The ones that couldn't be handled with regex were often Python scripts, because we often kept several modules in the same file, so those had to be split out. So Python would step through those, create the new files, copy the code over, change the module format, everything like that. So.
Oh, that's awesome. I just did a project where I did all that manually, and really should have thought of a Python script.
Our project is so large, it would have just been nearly impossible to do it manually. You counted the components the other day.
1,800 components.
Yeah.
Wow.
100 components in the project.
Oh, man. I thought I was working on a big project. Wow, so that's a lot of code, and you were able to go through all those upgrades. Sounds like fairly smoothly.
Not really.
No.
Some of it was smooth and some of it was not. Some of them, they were missing semicolons, and some of them, they were just missing entire method bodies. It was pretty wild in terms of, we also had another developer working on our team who we didn't really have good branch management or code management. So we lost things in the upgrade, and I guess taking care of that is where we are right now.
Uh-huh.
During that process of the transition, did you guys hire on specifically for Ember developers, and was that difficult to find?
The last developer we hired just recently.
About a week ago.
About a week ago. We advertised for an Ember position, and that was very difficult. We weren't able to find, for the applicants that we had, we didn't really find anyone with like solid previous Ember experience. But we basically filtered by people who really knew JavaScript and, really knew how to program. They weren't just like making web pages for marketing or whatever.
I'd imagine it would be easier for them to pick up Ember.
Exactly. And the person we hired had a lot of Angular experience. It was very different, but it has enough similarities that he was able to pick up Ember pretty quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, so you got him a week ago and he's already up and running?
Yeah, he's already committed several components. He's doing great.
Awesome. So if you have 1,800 components, what's your philosophy on when to componentize something?
Basically, we try to keep it kind of two things, like single-purpose components that have a minimal interface, so they don't take much to be passed in. They don't need to pass much out. So self-contained, modularized components. And sometimes we'll split those up into sub-ones if they need to be reused frequently throughout the app.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, there's a lot of very standard components that we've built, like different drop-down type menus, toggle buttons, and things like that are just used everywhere.
Uh-huh.
Small, minor components. And then we have the larger ones for the big data visualization and charting and all of that.
Yeah, and each of those are made up of a bunch of smaller components, I'd imagine.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so you guys are diving headfirst into that part of the new architecture.
Yeah, absolutely.
Have the new closure actions, have you guys been able to take advantage of those? Have those helped your component structure?
Because of the legacy code, we haven't used much of them yet.
Uh-huh.
That is something that we want to put into the upgrade. We have another product that we just launched recently called Canvas.
Uh-huh.
And that I started working on earlier this year, and it just launched recently. So that we are able to start from modern Ember from the start. And so it uses a lot more of the modern features and structure.
Yeah, a lot of the time it's really useful because then you can get used to the new architecture without having to haul along like 10,000 pounds of code.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. So has Ember solved any organizational issues for you guys? Like, how does working together as a team on Ember work for you guys?
Going back to the choice of frameworks, that was actually a big reason I liked Ember as well. Our previous version of the app used Backbone in some places, some weird like hand-coded JavaScript in other places. It was very disorganized.
Uh-huh.
Very hard to follow. So one of the things I liked about Ember was it had a very opinionated structure and it had its way of doing things, which has really helped with working as a team because it adds a lot of consistency to the code and just naturally allows the different developers to keep a similar structure and format.
Yeah, I've definitely found the same thing. Just being able to jump into different code bases and be able to be productive very quickly.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it sounds like there's a huge benefit there. And we already talked about some of the difficulties that are still there, like part of the upgrade process, especially ember-cli. Are there any other big difficulties that it's been causing you?
As far as the upgrade?
Using Ember compared to other tools.
Oh, an early on issue that we're slowly solving was Ember did not originally play nice with SVG.
Uh-huh.
We had a lot of issues with data binding within SVG blocks and templates.
Right.
Which meant we had to do a lot of manual work with observers and some weird jQuery stuff and D3 stuff.
Yeah. And HTML bars has solved that, right?
It has, and way cleaner. Significantly reduces the size of the code. And just it's a lot easier to follow. It works better. It's faster. But that was a very big challenge early on.
Yeah. Awesome. And so the next question is about whether you guys are hiring. And I know right now we're recording this in November. We're probably going to release the first episodes of this starting sometime in January. So I know you guys can't peer into the future, but do you expect to be hiring?
I imagine, given our release cadence, at the moment we probably wouldn't be hiring, but as we do grow, as we build upon Atlas and Canvas more, we'll be looking into hiring more Ember and D3 devs. We actually do have a support engineer or sysadmin role on our engineering team, and we are also always hiring Python developers who are interested in text analytics, NLP, things like that.
All right, so if you're Python, a test engineer, or Ember or D3, then in January, when this is released, they should give you a call.
Come on board. Yeah.
All right. Awesome.
And you're not looking for remote, right? Sorry to interrupt. You guys are looking for in Kansas, right? Not remote.
In Kansas City, Missouri. Yeah, Kansas City, Kansas. We have some people who live there, but we encourage them to just cross over the river. It's nicer here.
Oh, I moved out too. All right. Well, thank you. Is there anything else you want to tell people?
No, that was good. That worked out well. I don't think we do. Thank you.
All right. Awesome. Yeah. Thank you guys for doing this.
Yeah, this was fun. This was like our first foray. So what we did is we had like a planning meeting maybe 3 weeks ago, and we were talking about like which direction we wanted to take the team.
Yeah.
So we talked about like cadences and software development lifecycle and all this, but we also talked about projector screens and hosting meetups and stuff. So this is kind of an initiative to build developer relations. And hiring a JavaScript developer was easy. Hiring a JavaScript developer who knew JavaScript was not easy.
Right. Yeah, it's like in 1999. You can hire someone who can make a web page.
Yeah.
But can you hire someone who can make a web page?
Yeah. So many of the candidates we interviewed, if it wasn't just raw jQuery to animation toggling a button that shouldn't even be done with JavaScript anymore, then they just didn't know what they were doing, and so it was very challenging.
Yeah,
because it's hard to articulate in the application what we mean by a strong developer with JavaScript and experience. So.
Yeah, I mean, until you have a serious application, then it's easy to get by on jQuery.
I'm curious, do you guys do take-home tests or whiteboarding during your interview process?
So our CEO is a Python developer, but he is usually the initial point of contact for most new recruits. We actually mixed it up this recruitment cycle, and Jessie and I kind of issued a screening interview. We took their resume and cover letter. Mm-hmm. We reviewed them, kind of like shot a few emails back and forth, what have you, and then said, hey, we'd like to chat with you on the phone. This will be a behavioral, and it'll also be a somewhat technical interview. Uh-huh. There was one candidate who answered every single question on the technical interview very, very bookishly, very accurately, but he didn't seem to give a damn about anything.
Didn't seem like his knowledge was very deep. It looked like he had found a bunch of posts online of what questions to expect in a JavaScript interview.
Oh, yeah.
And he, because it sounded like he was reciting from rote.
Yeah.
Like he had just memorized the answer to everything.
Yeah, that's nice.
So, he comes into the job and is like, what technique should I use? Should I use FizzBuzz or recursion?
Yeah.
Those are the only two I know.
Yeah. So after the phone interview, we kind of chatted, like, do you like this person? Do you not like this person? Generally, our CEO sat in on most of those chats. I remember during Chris is the name of the guy that we hired. Justin, our CEO, was not there for his phone interview, so that was kind of funny. In that when we offered Chris the in-person interview, after giving him a request for a code sample based on our API data, so we do linguistic analysis. I think it was the emotions object.
Yeah, we basically just got one of our JSON dumps from our API, one of the more complex ones, threw it at him and said, make us some visualizations. That was pretty much the extent of our instructions because we wanted to see, let their creativity come into play and see what they could create from that.
And this dude gave us a visualization that was almost exactly as the one that we use in Atlas.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
and he didn't have access to Atlas.
Nobody. No. It was awesome.
So that's a really good culture fit.
Yeah. Yeah, and then he came in, and we have kind of like a snarky, witty banter culture here, I guess. So during the interview, he engaged in that just kind of off the cuff. We didn't even plan for it.
Yeah.
I prepared a list of questions based on his resume. She prepared just questions that she had off the top of her head. And we went back and forth, and eventually I was just like, I'm satisfied. Are you satisfied? And she was like, yeah. So I think it was a Wednesday that he came in for the interview. We had an interview the day after that, and we were like, okay, if this guy afterwards blows us away, we'll hold off on issuing Chris an offer. But Chris was just, exactly what we were looking for in a candidate. Reasonable amount of JavaScript experience, reasonable amount of web dev, really cared. It was a very good experience overall. But just having those filters to get through developers was incredibly important.
Yeah, I was just interested.
I'm like way into like organizational development and HR and stuff as far as software development goes.
Yeah, Neil has been very helpful because while he is passionate about that, I am the exact opposite. I just like the code. I like to make things. I like to architect. The organizational stuff, somebody else can handle that. And Neil's been very, very good at getting us to a little bit more of a professional level as far as the organization and tracking changes and transparency within the company and all of that sort of thing.
I mean, people are like an API, but they're undocumented and they do a different thing every time.
Yeah.
It's a funny way of looking at it.
Cool. All right, now I think this is the real end.
All right.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. We'll see you around.
All right, sounds good.
This is the end of the show, but here's a message from our sponsor. Our sponsor who happens to be me. So I run ember-screencast.com. If you're an intermediate level developer, then this site is for you. So you've read your introductory book and you're ready to get started, but you're not quite into reading the source code yet. So I go and I explain some of the basics, but I also explain cool add-ons and some intermediate to advanced topics as well. So go ahead and check out ember-screencast.com. 2 screencasts released every week for the intermediate Ember developer. I hope to see you there.